all Canadian families, we are on the Titanic. The iceberg hasn't hit yet, so we're not sinking. If we don't shift course, that iceberg is coming for us.
I'm not planning on leaving. I'm fighting. We want to make this country incredibly great.
We begin to see that it really isn't about diversity. It is about punishing the people who perform beyond the mean.
For people who don't care, where do you see Canada going?
Oh, it's catastrophic. It is that bad.
What is the carbon tax doing to lower carbon emissions?
Exactly.
I love this country. I was born in this country. I believe in what this country stands for. I believe in its people. I believe as a place opportunity for all to come and live, but the path that we're on is not working. And we are not going to be what we're supposed to be if we continue along this path.
Yeah. Citizens, welcome. Good to have you guys here. Today's a special episode. We've got a lot to talk about. And
We got who's becoming a friend of the show.
yes, indeed.
Martin.
Second appearance. Welcome.
Welcome back. You're our first ever second appearance, just so you know.
Oh, am I honored or what?
We should probably hang your picture on the wall, I think, or something like that. Just for you guys, if you're not familiar with Martin Pelletier, you guys should follow him on X. He's got, I think, a voice that's worth listening to. Senior portfolio manager, Wellington Altus, also Financial Post columnist. Thanks for being with us today.
You betcha.
We want to get your thoughts just on everything.
On the last couple episodes, we kind of been discussing like everything going on, and a number of times before and after the show, we're like, we gotta ask Martin. We gotta figure out what his take is on this. And so all of a sudden we went, let's see if we can get him back on.
Well, we're dealing with new presidency, which is putting pressure on Canada. We're dealing with potential tariffs, which we bought some time with from our government. We're also dealing with a prorogued parliament in Canada and a liberal government that is trying to figure out who their next leader is. We have a prime minister who says he's stepping down but hasn't, and he has to wait. Financial uncertainty, inflation, lots of stuff going on in the world.
Yeah, it's a hot mess.
Yeah, just broad strokes. How are you feeling generally about Canada and being Canadian?
I'm trying not to let it get me down.
Okay.
First of all, because there's so much uncertainty out there. And since COVID, there's been a shift and a build up towards anxiety around that uncertainty. And some of the policy decisions that have been made have led to us being in a situation we're in today.
Yeah.
And now we've hit a wall. In my latest Financial Post column, I talk about being caught in a riptide.
Yeah.
And you can try and fight it, or you can just relax, stay calm, and try and find your way to shore. And that's my approach. I'm trying to stay calm and collective and trying to get as much data as we can to get ourselves to shore. And that's the approach I think we need to take across the country instead of, trying booing at the hockey games, those sort of stuff. Like, let's just grow up here and let's be adults and let's try and get ourselves safely to shore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I saw that boo, I thought that was a little childish, to be honest. Before we get a little deeper into it, maybe let our audience know kind of what you do for your work. I think you have an extremely qualified voice, and you guys will be able to learn today about the state of Canada, especially when it comes to the finance and the political outlook, when it comes to what it means to build wealth. Are we doing that in Canada, or are we making it harder for ourselves? Let us know a little bit maybe what your day-to-day is like, and so our guys know.
So I'll back it up a little bit. I started my career in investment banking. I was a research analyst on the energy side. So I traveled the world looking at various energy projects and how that benefited those countries and how to invest in those companies as well too. Mm-hmm. And then I moved over to what's called the buy side and managing a fund, managing client money, and from a risk perspective, looking at everything from a return versus risk basis. And so a lot of that is involved getting as much data as I can directly from the sources and analyzing the data on both sides so we can make smart decisions in managing our clients' portfolios. Mm-hmm. And so that leads to discussions around politics, geopolitics, obviously, policies that are being made, taxation, a number of different items. And so we're paid to manage those client portfolios in regards to minimizing the risk. Because a lot of our clients have taken risk, or entrepreneurs, built up a nice nest egg of wealth, and they're facing the same kind of anxiety and worries about what lies ahead. not just for themselves, but for their kids. And so we work with their kids sometimes as well, and education and mapping out a different course. So it's becoming the trusted advisor and being a screen for a lot of that information that we're seeing.
And would you agree with me that you probably see a bit of a pulse of what's happening or going to happen probably before a lot of other people, because you're dealing with CEOs and entrepreneurs and people who are quite wealthy running companies who have many employees underneath them. And so if you can get a sense of what they're doing, you can get a sense of what their worries are, or maybe they're if they're going to be bullish or bearish.
Yeah, and so for example, we were working on one potential large client to become part of our services, and they decided to leave the country. And so with a very entrepreneurial background, was international, came into Canada and decided to leave. And so when you see things like that, and if there's happens to be more of that, then it's like, okay, what's the problem here? What's the underlying issue? And what's the takeaway?
So what kind of, if you can divest this, what kind of things are you doing for your clients in this current climate we're in to help them not just protect, but maybe see their nest egg grow to be able to build a future? Are you able to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So what we do is a time to add risk and a time to remove, remove risk from the equation when it comes to investing. And in today's environment, I liken it to going into I'll use a hockey analogy here, going into the third period. We had two big wins the last 2 years in the markets. And now we're facing a whole bunch of, the opposition's coming out very strong. A lot of things that we don't know that are going to have an impact are going to play out. So I call it playing the trap, playing trap zone hockey, hoping that they make a mistake so we can, maybe put a rifle shot in the net, but being more defensive. And we've been given 30 days here. And so we've been de-risking portfolios, putting downside protection in place, and giving away some of the upside, locking in some returns. So if markets do face a correction, our clients are going to be protected from it. And if they don't, then we're going to participate in the upside, maybe not to the full extent. So it's just tapering our expectations for what we're seeing out there.
How much do you guys operate in terms of, no one has a crystal glass ball. Do you mind moving your mic a bit closer, by the way, just so they can, there you go, that's better. No one's got a crystal ball they can see everything through. But in terms of being predictive versus reactive, how do you guys balance that when you have so much uncertainty? Do you have, no one can ever predict with certainty, but is there a certain amount of, we're guessing where the markets are going, we think it's going to go this way, versus reaction?
No, it comes down to insurance. And there's a good time to add insurance and when you don't need it. And so I'll give you a perfect example. If you look at historically, there's a strong correlation between valuation and forward returns in the markets. And so if you look at the S&P 500 going back 30 years, plotting, there's a great plot done by JP Morgan Asset Management, and it shows each month what the PE multiple was and what the forward return was 10 years later. We're at the point where the forward return, based on the current multiples over 10 years, looking at the last 30 years, is plus or minus 2%. So that's telling you that we're not going to average plus or minus 2%. We're going to get a big wallop of a correction. It may be this year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 or 4 years away. And so now is it, with the level of complacency out there, level of euphoria, the price of adding insurance into your portfolio is very inexpensive. And when you think you don't need it, and so now's a good time to start adding some insurance. You can do that through the option market. You can do that through structured notes. You could do different types of investment products. You can add in some insurance. It's very inexpensive to do so. So, for example, I won't get the technicals of it, but one thing that we more recently did was on the Russell 2000, which is the mid cap and small cap space in the U.S. We were able to participate in that trade from now until November with zero downside risk. We put in put protection and upside cap at 15%. So now we have a payoff profile of 0 to 15% through to November of this year. That's a fantastic asymmetric payoff profile that adds some downside risk protection. And if you get 15% from now until November, our clients would be very happy, and we'll be happy as well. Right?
And you're not just minimizing, are you you're covering your downside essentially.
Yes, so you're putting in insurance to protect yourself on the downside. That's the best way, because market timing is impossible to do.
Of course.
It really is. Last year, I thought the markets were ahead of themselves last year. And the average retail investor in the U.S. only made 4% last year because they thought the same thing, and they went to cash, and they missed out on a heck of a year in the markets. Whereas we were still in the markets, we didn't have as much downside protection as we do now, but we still had some, and we generated some half-decent returns.
Interesting. Well, thanks for that little piece of advice.
No, I
that's free, everybody. If you want more, you got to figure out how to connect with Martin.
Say, I'm like, I feel like we owe you for that financially.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Okay, so I want to get your take on, initially when you heard about the 25% tariffs that Trump was threatening Canada with, what was your initial thoughts on that when he did that? Was it cause for concern? How does that affect us as Canadians?
So my first initial reaction was, this is straight out of the art of the deal, and he's just going to come out with a hammer and then back off. Talking with people in the U.S., contacts, talking with strategists, global strategists, it changed my mind. This is a much different situation than the last term he was in, and what we're witnessing now is likely going to stay in place for the foreseeable future. And so we're going to have to make some changes and pivot and realize the seriousness of what we're seeing, and not say, let's hope and that it's going to go back to the way it was before, because it isn't.
Yeah, because I think that's the real question is we're trying to figure out, like it started off by him discussing safety, fentanyl, and it doesn't seem that seemed to be the first bit of language he was using to have a reason for the tariffs. And now he's no longer talking about that. Now he just continually just talks about how Canada has resources, land, they need it for safety. And he's kind of using that language now on repeat to justify the tariffs.
Now, I wouldn't downplay the fentanyl issue. That still is a serious issue. People saying, well, look at the dollar. I think it's more along the lines of money laundering. The money laundering in this country is out of control, and there's been some excellent exposés on that, and you can see that into the real estate market. And so that money laundering brings in drugs and crime. And talking with strategists, I had breakfast with one this morning, saying that if we actually saw the information that was presented to governments on the money laundering in this country, we would be shocked. And so it is a serious issue. It really is. And it's part of a bigger issue that the U.S. is hoping to address. And so we have to take that seriously.
We do. There are serious issues even when it comes to our national security, border security. Like even if you look at the Port of Vancouver, we did a whole episode on the amount of seepage that happens in that port. And it's the second largest, I believe, port in North America. And less than 2% of the containers are actually checked.
Wow.
Right? And you've got tens of thousands of those passing by daily. The Sinaloa cartel actually has a stronghold in that area, not just low-level guys, but they're high-level guys, because, as you said, when you have money laundering and you have got laxed, you're not coming down on that. It attracts that type of stuff. So you're right, that is a concern for sure. But I also do think that is a means to a greater goal they're trying to achieve in terms of when it comes to trade, when it comes to re-leveling the international trade through our world with the U.S. That's part of what, because you look at the Panama Canal, you look at different things that Trump has been doing. You have thoughts on that?
Yeah, and so it comes down to national security. That's an issue. Countries have been relying on the U.S. for that security, including Canada as well, and we haven't been playing our role in a fair part in that in itself. Arctic security, for example. And so the U.S. is positioning themselves around the positioning of strength and using its trade to do so. Now, the transformation of reshoring trade and bringing those resources back into the U.S., repatriating, it's already happening with auto manufacturing, and it's already having its intended effect. And so tariffs are being used to bring that capital back into the U.S. and shift the balance of trade. And so away from the U.S. being solely the consumers of goods, but to actually being the producer of goods. Now that's going to have a near-term inflationary impact. That may not be long-lasting, but it could. We don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty around that. If you look at the money is going to be generated from the tariffs, they need that money because they're running still a very, very large deficit, and we haven't seen the kind of cuts that's been talked about as of yet. And how are you going to pay for corporate tax cuts? And so there's a lot of what we're witnessing is probably going to stay intact for some time now. And so we have to be able to adjust to that and realize that, but 3/4 of our trade goes to the U.S. and 17% of their trade comes into Canada. And so we're a lot more reliant on them than they are on us, even though us and Mexico are their biggest trading partners. And so we have to put ourselves in their shoes as much as possible and look at it from their lens, not our lens, in our response.
What are your thoughts on how are these tariffs going to affect the average middle class Canadian? Like, what are we going to see if this actually gets implemented and sticks around for a long period of time? Like, what would the daily life look like?
It's going to get hard. The Canadian economy is going to enter a recession, if not already, more so in certain areas than others. And you have a Canadian dollar that I think you had mentioned that you were going to go to the U.S. and we're at 69 cents, and it's probably going to go lower. The Bank of Canada is going to have to cut interest rates more, which will put more pressure on the currency. We import a lot of goods from the U.S., so the cost of those goods are going to go up if we respond, especially if we respond in kind to tariffs on their goods coming into Canada and the low Canadian dollar, and then the economic pullback. And so it's going to be harder on the average Canadian, and that's what we need to hear. What's the plan? How are we going to get through this, and how are we going to take something that's happened to us and make it something that's for us, so we can come out of something? We can do the poor me, blame them, or what am I going to do about it? We need to get to what are we going to do about it, and we're not hearing a lot of that. Rather than, we're gonna fight tooth and nail, we're gonna put tariffs on this. We can't win that battle. So let's find a different path forward. And I'm not hearing a lot of that from any of the politicians, including the Conservatives.
Well, there was some talk of this package. Have you heard about this? That the NDP and the Liberals were discussing, which to me just felt like such a backwards move to do. But they were talking about putting together a relief package for
everyone. How are you going to pay for it?
Exactly.
They have no money. Exactly. They can't pay for it.
Exactly. So I wanted you to kind of unpack that for those who don't know what that package necessarily is or could be. It's probably not that specific, but what would that do to us if we actually had a huge package?
We can't do it. Like we already did it once through COVID. We just don't have the fiscal capacity to do it.
But I miss it. What do you mean by package?
So there's this package. I don't know. It's vague right now. I don't think there's actually any hard details on it. But they were discussing putting together a package for anyone affected by the tariffs.
Oh, a relief package, like a COVID relief package.
So essentially, it's essentially going to increase inflation. It's essentially going to hurt our dollar, and by temporary relief, I guess, to the individuals in a very temporary way. But it's only going to perpetuate our current situation.
But we didn't have money in 2020 when we did that.
No, but we had a fiscal situation that was much better than we are now with our deficit.
It's changed that much.
So you can run. You could borrow more money. Everyone else was doing it. You could print money to fund that deficit. You can't print money to buy government debt anymore. Interest rates are higher, right? So your borrowing costs for the government are that much higher, and so there just isn't the fiscal capacity to do that kind of a budget without impacting the economic standing of our value of our debt, for example. And so you can do it, yes, but it's going to have some you mentioned inflation. There's going to be all kinds of costs to it. What we need to do is we need to say, okay, we need to unify ourselves. We need a national infrastructure program, and what does that look like? Forget about Energy East, and like those are some old policies, but let's look at some new policies. Let's look at getting LNG to the West Coast. I think the relationship between the Premier of British Columbia and Alberta has never been stronger. And so there's some alliances there and some strengths that we can build upon in Western Canada to get energy to Tidewater and to international markets. And there's an auxiliary benefit to that. Don't forget, since 2017, we've given, I think, a third of $1 trillion in equalization payments into Eastern Canada and to Quebec in particular. And so there's a huge economic benefit of energy. And so there'll be an economic benefit if we can look at what do you want, Trump? Do you want some titanium? Do you want lithium? Do you want some material? We're here. We can help provide that. We can expand our oil down to the U.S., but also at the same time, try and get it to Tidewater and to international markets to get better pricing. Yeah. So having a national energy and infrastructure program would be an excellent way of doing it. This battery fiasco of going and subsidizing battery technology that the Chinese can do it for a fraction of the cost. It just doesn't work. And so we need to go down the path of least resistance and what are our core strengths, and that's energy. And then that energy benefits all of Canada, not just Alberta.
You mentioned we don't have any money for a relief package, but do you believe the current Liberal leadership, let's say if Carney ends up taking the Liberal leadership, is that something you think he would do with his extensive financial background that he has as formerly governor of Bank of Canada and Bank of England?
He is a very smart individual,
no doubt, yeah.
And given his pedigree and his background, he knows what he can and can't do, and that's a divergence away from the previous, the existing government, I guess per se now, and so he does know what he can and can't do. And so I wouldn't see that being on the table. Now, on the flip side, if it's a minority government, they need the NDP to support them like this. Who knows what the political motivations are and how that could be, that could change.
That's the thing. Yeah. There's like that. It's looking like that might be their only shot to maintain or hold on to power, right? Having Jagmeet and those guys go. Mm-hmm. Man, interesting. All these things. We're going to look back in this moment and be like, this is like historic what we're walking through, I think, in this last year and going forward.
Well, I honestly think that in the last 50 years, we've become a culture of complacency. And we've relied on the U.S.
Yeah.
We've made some money in energy, and now it's like, well, we can implement all these massive climate change policies and cap oil and gas because we don't need it anymore. And when reality we do, we can run big deficits. And so we're buffered by our strong real estate market that made people feel very confident.
Yeah.
And so, I don't need to work as hard as I used to. Mm-hmm. And that's passed down to generation. And so we've reached a point where we're no longer and I talked about this last time I was on the show, nearly as productive as we should be to compete against. We can't even compete against the U.S. Yeah. How are we going to compete against China and India and Eastern Europe, which is taking names and kicking butt? And so we've lost our competitive advantage. And now, at the same time, we're being hit with these big threats from our biggest customer and our best friend, and now that's changing, and that relationship is changing, and we're told that we can no longer rely on that relationship, and here we are. How are we going to pay for all of these social programs that are under a lot of stress from the record level of immigration? How are we going to pay for a lot of the dental program when we don't have energy security to generate cash flow for these sorts of things? And so we're at an important crossroads. And do we elect somebody like Carney that's just going to go down the same path of where we were in the last 10 years, or do you go in a different direction? And if you go in a different direction, is the conservative government, are they... they've said some good things about criticizing the existing government, but we haven't heard a lot about what their plan is to get us out of this mess. Yeah. Because it's going to be a big mess that they inherit. So whoever's taking over, Carney or Pierre, they're going to, how are we going to get out of this?
Yeah.
And all I know is that Carney's going to be doing more of the same and more of the climate change. And I believe in climate change, but putting that as a number one issue when our kids can't, we talked about this earlier too, our kids can't get a job, they can't get a house. It's hard to get into university these days. And so all the opportunities that we had are no longer there. And that's our future. That's why we're doing all of this.
Yeah.
This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. We're planting trees.
Yeah.
And if the trees can't get enough sun or water, they're going to die and they're not going to grow. And that's our future.
Yeah.
What are you advising your kids right now to do? How are you trying to help them go forward?
Take risk, get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And to get to learn as much as they can about different areas of interest. And so people say go all in on your passion, and well, that doesn't necessarily work. My oldest son's is a really good skier and ski competitively. I mean, that's his passion, but you can't earn a living doing skiing. If you could, I would be doing it. And so he said that, well, math is a challenge for me. And I said, well, you don't know if you can use it for something else.
Yeah.
And if you find a use for it, you'll do well at it. And so maybe try, if you thought about my business. And so I enrolled him at the University of Calgary into a investment course taught by a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And signed him up for a securities course, and he's loving it.
Cool.
And so it's out of his comfort zone. He didn't think he would be good at it, and he's doing well at it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so is that going to develop into doing what I'm doing? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So exposing your kids to something different, and where there's a future, right? Yeah. And if it's a trades, there's nothing wrong with trades. We're short trades. You can't disrupt the plumber, for example.
Yeah.
So maybe if your kids are hands on. Go into look at something like that, or my son's friend's going into being an electrician, and then he actually wants to start an electrician business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's exactly it. It's the business. The something I always hear you talk about is risk, managing risk, but also taking risks. If we're always playing in the safe side, we're never going to advance. And that's something, because the question I have for someone who's like a plumber, I'm going, the way that the cost of living is climbing at such a rate, I don't know if the wages are climbing at the same rate, but exactly like you said, start a business and then you can actually offset that.
There's a great quote by Nassim Taleb, and he said that the three most dangerous things we're addicted to are carbohydrates, heroin, I think, or drugs, and the monthly salary.
The salary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can become a slave to it.
For sure.
Yeah.
I can't think of maybe anything else that might actually limit people's abilities that they have.
Yeah.
Because you get so comfortable and dependent on it that you don't want to risk anything to lose that. Meanwhile, you said earlier, you'd potentially be missing on so much upside potential if you were to tap into it. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
I've been hearing a lot as I'm studying finance and the mindset behind finance and reading, because obviously Jeremy and I we try to build business and build our lives and be able to build something that we can pass down for generations. We believe in that. And the more I find that I'm learning, it's actually the biggest thing that's been holding me back in finance has been my mindset and the way I think about it. Like, and I used to think, like, laugh when people would say that, 'cause like, I don't, that's so cliche.
No,
But it actually is a thing.
It is.
It is such a thing to be able to expand your mind and to realize how money works, what it is. It's a tool, but to free yourself from the shackles of a $2,000 paycheck or whatever it is.
There's a clip you just made me think of. It's Alex Hormozy. But he's got this clip where he's actually advising a business owner who's a barber, and he owns the shop, and he's got 8 chairs, and then he's got 1 chair for himself. And so he was getting advice from Alex Hormozy, who's just a very successful guy who teaches people how to level up business and multiply themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And so the guy says, I have these 8 chairs, which actually pays for half of everything, but my chair, the 9th, actually pays for the other half. And so he goes, I got to keep that 9th chair running. It's 50% of everything I do. And Alex immediately goes, you've got to get rid of that 9th chair. And he was like, what are you talking about? He goes, you got to find 8 more chairs, because your most precious thing you have is you and your skill set and your time.
Yeah.
And he goes, everyone gets stuck in the 9th chair mentality that you think, well, it's 50% of everything I do. I got to grind it out. And he's going, you got to find 8 more chairs, 8 more chairs. And now you have 8 chairs and 8 chairs, and you're now free. And then it's exactly like you're saying, where it's like, it is a risk. It's not exactly the easiest thing in the world to find 8 more chairs in whatever realm you're talking about, but that freedom will give you the ability to go and to be an entrepreneur, to diversify.
Otherwise, you're just buying yourself a job.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so you're working on that monthly salary again. Yeah. So you need to find ways, and that was one of the reasons why we partnered. We had our own business, our own practice, and then we partnered with Wellington Altus. And what really helped was we did an audit of our time, and I found that my fund box, the stuff I was really good at, that I enjoyed a lot. My passion that made actually financial results and yielded
it's your
something.
passion and it's bringing results.
Yeah, and it's generating a really high return for a low level of risk.
Yeah.
And so we did an audit of our time, like, well, I'm just spending too much of my time on the pipes and plumbing, which are very essential. In our business is highly regulated, and there's a lot of back office work. And so we said, how do we do that? How do I get rid of that chair and have 8 more? And so we partnered with Wellington. They've been fantastic. So they took care of all of our back office and compliance. And all of a sudden my fund box, managing portfolios and dealing with clients, went up by 40-50%. And so our portfolio performance in the last 5 years, we've been there for 5 years, has been exceptional. And you can notice an improvement, a material improvement, in addition to our client servicing. And so we had to give up a percentage of our top line revenue to do that with that partnership, but we were able to scale at a level we weren't able to before. And so understanding where your core strengths are and finding partners that can deal with all of the other aspects that they're good at. Right. And then it's 2 + 2 = 10, and it really works out really well. And so going back to our kids is now you can't just jump to that right away. You have to go and work in a bigger organization and put in the time and understand, have some humility, and then learn from that environment, and then come into that with an entrepreneurial aspect of it. And so understanding where those partners are, having good mentors are really important. A lot of young people don't just want to jump to something right away, but having a mentor and understanding it. I mean, your barber shop, you had to work cutting hair initially.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Learning the ins and outs of it. And then it's like, okay, this works, this doesn't work, and how do I scale this out?
Yeah.
I love that you guys did an audit of your time. It's the whole Pareto principle, right? The 80-20, because there's so many times where we just get caught in the rut. And the idea of comfort kills. Like if you just get comfortable, it's going to kill dreams, potential. It's going to kill all these things because you get caught in this trap of being comfortable. But like you said, doing an audit of your time, right? You guys could have stayed comfortable. You had your routines and you guys were doing fine. But for the idea of growing and the idea we got to chop out the things that are not benefiting us, whereas if I could allocate my time somewhere else, I feel like we're always trying to do that. Like I'm always trying to find them in my life, especially at work with the things we're doing with television and growth, is what are the things that are just not worth my time to do that we can move to the side or find something else, and where are the growth opportunities? Because in a big growth stage right now.
So I call it an ROI audit, return on investment. Now, the most valuable asset you have is your time. And how are you allocating it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
During the work day. Obviously, your time with your family is why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the highest return on investment, is the time that you're spending with your kids or your spouse or your parents and that sort of thing. But within the workplace, I find there's so much waste of time. I have friends that are just run around in meetings all day, and they feel good because they say, how are you? I'm busy. And they view busy being successful.
Love it.
And I don't view being busy as successful.
I agree.
It really isn't. And so there's a lot of wasted meetings and a lot of wasting time. So there's a tremendous power to saying no, right? And so finding, mapping out your day. There was a great podcast on the Huberman Show talking about MIQ, most important question, and identifying where you are and your highest level of productivity in the day. And maximizing that productivity. And so you could produce way more in those 4 or 5 hours and not spending 10 hours doing something because you're in there for the FaceTime or whatever the case may be, and doing all these other meetings, right? And so what am I going to get out of it? Right. And so like last night there was a dinner with an economist, and it was interesting, but I'm like, okay, I have to do that. Am I going to do that? What am I really going to get out of that? Or am I going to go taekwondo with my son who just loves that with me and spends that with me? And I'm like, okay, that's important, but I can read about that easily when I go to bed. I'm going to go do the taekwondo, hands down. No, I'm canceling the dinner. It would have been a nice dinner and a little getaway and that sort of thing, but that's my highest ROI.
Love it.
Right? And so doing that time audit, canceling those meetings. You don't need to have those meetings.
Yeah.
Right.
You're speaking right to me right now, man. That's one of the biggest things in my life right now is I'm constantly auditing what I need to be doing. We juggle, like we're at a very pivotal time in not only our personal worlds, but also on the front of what we're doing. As we were telling you, we're currently in the expansion of a second channel that's now live nationwide across Canada. So it requires a lot of attention, a lot of meetings, but it's still, we are limiting the growth of the company and its potential if we're micromanaging everything. And it's a hard lesson. That's either you learn the hard way, or you proactively get ahead of it. And you're speaking right there. I'm taking notes. I'm going. I'm actually taking notes. I'm like, I need to listen to that podcast because this is what I need right now. I got 3 kids, a 10, 8, and a 5-year-old, or almost 5-year-old. And to me, anytime I miss it, like we were looking at our schedules coming up, and I have all sorts of flights for the next 3 weeks. And I'm like, gosh, man, out of 21 days, I think I'm gone 16. And I'm like, this is horrible. That's not what I'm in this for. I'm just as you said, I'm working so that I can be with my kids, not the other way around. Like you're hitting me at home. And that's why we care about all this stuff. Because when I ask you about what is this going to mean for the middle class individual, it's like, we're all working so we can just actually live with our family and enjoy memories in life. And if it's getting harder and we got to work longer and our dollar has less value, it ultimately means less of that, less family time. And it hurts. That's where it hits the most.
And we want to grow something. We all want to build something. We want to build something for our kids, right?
Yeah.
And
100%.
And so we want to
Absolutely.
give them the opportunities that we never have. I think our generation probably spoiled them a little too much, but for the most part, these young people just they want to do something, but they're paralyzed by what's ahead of them.
Yeah.
Right. And so they have you mentioned comfort. I love it because they're comfortable. And
Totally.
And so my kids are comfortable. And so
I've been there. I find myself, if I'm not actively aware of what areas I'm comfortable my life in, it's like I want to force myself. I want to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like you're always pushing the new boundary. Like it's never comfortable to break through new capacities or new boundaries. It's always uncomfortable.
Have you gotten through to your kids? Do they know that they're comfortable?
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite proud of them.
That's cool.
And it means there's some challenges and I'm patient and I have to be patient. I can't have the same expectations and what I did place that on them.
Yeah.
Because it's a different world.
Yeah.
And so I can't say when I was your age I was doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't do that. It's going to take longer. And I understand that.
Yeah.
But as long as they're taking risk and pushing themselves to do certain things, then I'm good with that.
That's awesome.
And if you fail, that's okay too. Like I'm here for you to help you. And I want you to fail multiple times.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what my parents, the biggest gift they ever gave me was a safety net. And they said, we're gonna. I was my first year out of university. I was working at a bank, and I was doing really well at the branch. And I couldn't get a job anywhere else because they didn't. I was doing well at the branch. They didn't want me to leave. And so I'm like, well, I really want to get into the investment banking world, that sort of thing. And my parents said, well, quit. Like, just quit. We'll buy you some new suits, and you've got contacts through your international business school. Fly out to Toronto.
Oh, so you had no certainty, but they were just saying, just do it.
Just
otherwise
do it. Break
won't.
it. Get away from that salary or that monthly. Get away.
Wow.
We'll support you. We'll pay for your flight. And I stayed with friends in those cities, and I cold called different places, and I got 3 job offers out of it, and it was amazing, and it worked out fantastic. Wow. And so
that's bold.
I wouldn't be where I was today without them doing that. And I'm going to do the same thing for my kids. And so I'm eternally grateful for my parents for doing that.
That's so good.
That's I like that a lot.
Knowing you got a little bit of a safety net, but they're pushing you to go do it and grind and hustle to get it done.
I don't know if my instinct would naturally do that to my kids. You know what I mean? It's
well, because you're like, well, hey, I got one out of the house, and they already have their bills paid for. They're self-sufficient, right? I was 26, sorry. Yeah. And while he's off, he's doing what he's doing.
How old are you? You look good.
Oh, thank you.
I'm like, wait, that's 27? How old are you now?
I turned 50 in October, but last season, my kids pushing the boundaries with fear. My kids taught me how to backflip on skis.
No way.
Last
Do you have a
winter.
video clip of that? You
I
must.
do, yeah.
Can you send that to us? Can we
Yeah.
show it on the show? Are you cool
You
with that?
can. I don't know. It's not a very clean one, but
I don't care. It'd be
I
so
think
cool.
it counts.
So are you still hucking them whenever you
That's
go skiing?
amazing.
Are you trying to find little kickers or what?
Oh no, I'm only when it was like 6 feet of snow. So
Yeah,
I had
so you had a pillow.
nice pillow.
I got a
safety
That's
net
a
to
good
land
analogy
on.
for what we're talking about here.
I'll tell you a
Hucking
funny
the
story.
backflip with the safety net.
So my good friend and I, his name's Josh Betcher. When we were at University of Manitoba, we made the mistake at University of Manitoba year one to have the exact same schedule because we're best buds and we got into trouble all the time. So we set ourselves up horrible to do well in the next years because we'd skip class all the time. We'd drive from Winnipeg on Friday after class, drive out to Sunshine Mountain in time to snowboard Saturday, Sunday, drive back philosophy, fall asleep in class on Monday morning. Anyways, Dick and Irene, his parents, skipped a whole, they were in Mexico for a whole week and they lived in a nice house. So Josh and I were like, well, Mom and Dad, I'm just going to stay with Josh. We're going to do this. We didn't go to class once. We spent the whole week, and they got a big house. So they got bobcats and all that. So we dumped snow.
Yeah, they have a ravine that they back onto.
On the stairs, on the patio. We built a giant drop-in ramp over the fence onto the lake just to practice backflips.
Oh, so you could
all
do
week. I don't think I landed one.
Okay.
I was helicopter spinning nonstop and like out of control, but we tried every single day.
That's amazing. Wow.
Those are the good times, man.
But you've successfully done it at the age of 50.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, 49.
Wow.
So
Even better. Wow.
yeah.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Okay, I'm gonna re-up
I know.
get back into them.
I know. Staying young is key. Like, and that's the other variable to all of this financial. It's like what good is your finances if you're not healthy enough to live a life?
Absolutely.
And that's a big deal. I've just started finally getting fit in this last year. And I just changed every part of my life. Like it really has. My sleep, my relationships, my everything. Just because you just feel better. You just operate at a better level. And it's
How do you
best I've ever
prioritize your
done.
life? If you're to think of if you're to segment your life, you've got work, you've got family, you've got fun, you've got health, you've got all these relationships, whatever. How do you prioritize? Like, do you have a list of what priorities they are?
So it would be family, health, and fun are mixed together.
Okay.
We had some challenges with the family dynamic, with some health issues, and some really big challenges that changed the way that we parent, changed the way our whole perspective on life. And so we're in that phase of reintroducing fun back into our family and doing things together, and having a healthy, fun relationship with our family dynamic. My kids are 16 and 19 and they still want to hang out with us. And
Very cool.
We're going to do a trip to Italy. This our first family trip in 7 years that we couldn't do because of health.
Yeah.
And so we're all going together, and it
that's
scares I say swear. It scares the out of me. But we're gonna make that work. We did we did a trip to Costa Rica last year, and it worked really well. And so we're introducing that into our core dynamic relationships. And then my spouse and I, we've been married for 22 years, and so it's as our kids are getting older, to re-energize our relationship with doing things together.
Totally.
Just going for coffee and date nights and making her a priority is very important for me. I know I got to do better at this, and so if she's watching, I will.
You got it on Citizen, the promise.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably one of the most valuable questions that David just asked you is that. And when I find a man that's successful and got it together, that's what I really want to know is.
Well, I don't have it together. I'm trying every day.
Well, but that's exactly it. Is that it is that it's a struggle. It's a constant struggle and a battle of priorities constantly. Yeah.
And then with work, I'm having a heck of a time. I love what I do.
Yeah.
I have the best clients. I'm not just saying that. They're so much fun and so interesting. And I was at one client's house last week, and they're a C-suite executive telling us stories about the president of this famous Canadian company and the stories there. And
that's awesome.
And so being able to connect with clients on a holistic level is very rewarding for me, and getting to know people. And then my whole motto, and I really try and do this, is it's changed a lot from when I was younger, is not having a goal of when I achieve this, I'm going to be happier. I'm going to try and achieve. I'm going to grow my business to this. Or when our family does this, it's all about every day is a new world. And yesterday doesn't matter. We've given an infinite number of second chances, and we can not be anchored by our mistakes in the past, because I make lots of mistakes. And forgiveness, I forgive myself and I forgive others. And let's just do a new day here. And what's this day going to bring? How exciting is it going to be? Who are the people are going to be? I'm chatting with you guys today, and this is pretty cool. And so finding these little adventures in each day that can give you a lot of rewards when you go. I go to bed early. I'm at bed at like 10 o'clock, and I'm just laying there and I meditate, and it's just looking back and being grateful of all the wonderful things that happen during the day.
Are you a religious guy at all?
Yep.
I was going to say a lot of the things you're talking about sounds like there's core principles that come from religion, which is cool. I was going to say kudos to you on that, because at least being able to acknowledge, like, we all as men mess up, but as long as we know the priorities that we have and what we keep trying to go forward, like for us, it's like, for me, my faith is a high priority, my family, my relationship with my wife, and then my kid. Make that in that order, because I think it's so healthy for my son to see I prioritize my wife. And then we come into work and all those things. And I love asking people, what is the priorities? Because a lot of times you see successful people in an area, but the other parts of the life, they may have lost control or had situations happen. And not demonizing anyone, but it's just cool to hear the priorities that you have for your life.
It's much more impressive for a person who can be successful on all fronts. You know what I mean? It's like if you throw all your energy at one thing only and everything else is garbage, it's like, well, I can't respect that as much. Obviously, there's some, of course, but to someone who can balance a family, a business, a relationship, and everything else that comes with it, it's like that's the greatest achievement.
You just have to find balance, and so by having that, I call it surrender. So you're just surrendering to the moment. And it goes back to my motto of things other than health and death and things like that are out of our control. And there's no reason for it. Like, no one can come up with any reason for that stuff that happens in life. It just happens. But for the most part, things happen for you, not to you. And so if you're going back to what you're saying, all the projects you're doing, if something that you're working on doesn't come together easily and you're really finding yourself, so it's not an immediate yes, right? Then maybe it's a time to say, okay, that's I'm going to let that go. And so letting things go and finding yourself more in a state of regulation, because when you're dysregulated is when you make mistakes.
Absolutely,
right? And we all get dysregulated.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I didn't get dysregulated on the drive over here. So it all happens. And so finding yourself, if you can get yourself in a state of regulation, then you get balance between other things, because there's going to be challenges. There's going to be challenges. I'm in the markets, like there's all kinds of stuff happening there, right? There's the tariff things. Yeah. And so it's like, what's in my control? How am I going to deal with it? A lot of the things that we're seeing that we talked about earlier are out of our control. And so we have to surrender to some extent and saying, okay, I'm going to pivot. I don't know what that pivot is going to look like. And, but if things are out of balance, I'm going to change.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice.
Love it.
Quickly, as we wrap up here, what do you hope to see in the next 3 to 6 months with Canada, our relationship with the US? What do you think the proper response is? We talked about way earlier, kind of the wrong response, or at least the wrong strategy, I think, in how we're handling Trump right now. What do you hope to see?
I hope we get our own house in order. I hope we realize how bad of a mess it is. And we get ourselves, as you mentioned, when a challenge happens or something bad happens to you, you can react to it and say, poor me, and blame them, and being self-pitying on the path of addiction or all kinds of negative behavior. Or you can say, I surrendered to this. There's a reason why this is happening. I need to change. And we're 50 years into this with Canada, and our productivity is, we can't compete with people. Our dollar, we have to rely on a low Canadian dollar. We have a housing market that's unaffordable for young people. Young people can't get jobs. Our healthcare system's falling apart. There's a lot of things that are not working. Yeah. And so we need to say, and it's being brought to the attention of somebody else, and Trump coming in with these tariffs. They're going to hurt us and cause even more pain, right? And so instead of saying we're going to fight you and we're going to push back, maybe it's take a step back. Let's get ourselves regulated, right? Let's find, I'm a big fan of the 3 R's in psychology: regulate, relate, and reason. So when you have a situation where two people are dysregulated, you cannot have anything productive out of that.
Yeah.
You have a dysregulated federal government and a dysregulated U.S. government, and we can't get anything out of that. So we need to take a step back, get ourselves regulated, okay? And once we're regulated, we can find some common ground to relate to. Find something common that maybe it's energy, maybe it's materials. Find something that we need each other for, that common ground.
Yeah.
And then reason at the very end.
Yeah.
Right? And then say, okay, I realize it seems like you're upset about these borders. It seems like you're upset about our lack of spending on the military. It seems like you're upset about these things. Is there anything I'm missing? Right? How can we collectively make this better? We value our relationship tremendously with you, right? And how can we make this productive for you and for us?
Yeah.
And we may not like the answer. I don't know. And then we need to get our own house in order. We need to get behind the scenes and stop criticizing and blaming Trump for everything. We got to deal with money laundering, hands down. We have to deal with our housing situation. We have to deal with our healthcare system that is failing. We have to deal with finding jobs for a number of the people that are new to the country and the younger people.
Yeah. Let's figure out interprovincial trade. Let's figure out how we can get our oil and gas, our natural resources to prosper us. There's all these things we can figure out.
There's all of these things, and we need to be united, not divided. So politicians for the last 10 years have been dividing the country, and I do worry that this will be used to continue to divide it, east versus west. And I have clients across the country, and we're all Canadian. I'm a direct descendant of the first Pelletiers, the first founding families in this country. I got deep roots here.
Wow.
But I also have deep roots to Alberta. My grandfather came to Quebec to Alberta in 1905.
Okay.
Yeah.
When it became a province, and so we all have deep roots and commonality. And let's look at our strengths, so we can do what our grandparents did and leave something better for the kids behind. Not a big nasty deficit and no jobs and no house.
Yeah.
We need to stop being selfish and say, how are we going to do this? How are we going to work together on? Does that mean doing more energy? Probably, yeah. Does that mean, that we have to pay a little bit more for this or that? Yes. How are we going to do it? And I'm not hearing any of that.
Yeah. That's a great way to end. That's such a good point. I believe that we still believe Canada has got a lot to offer, and we can be a fantastic country. We've got the natural abilities here. But I like what you said, is that most things happen for us and not to us. And I think we can utilize the situation of President Trump, maybe pinpointing a couple issues that we're having, but that we can use this as a situation that's happening for us and actually be able to, as you said, look at ourselves. I like how you said regulate, gather. I think as citizens becoming also aware and understanding the issues we're facing, so that we actually can become a cohesive unit to build a great country. Like we got some rebuilding to do, but I think we can. And
we have to stop the dualistic thinking. So because I'm not a fan of the Trudeau policies or Carney policies, it doesn't put me in the camp of being a Trump supporter.
Sure.
Or if I'm not a Trump supporter, it doesn't put me in the camp of being like, we need to stop this. If you're for me or against me, or it's this, we all have to look at the broader issues and say, okay. And I'm happy to criticize what some of the lack of policies and go forward, lack of what we're seeing out of the conservative government. And so like we need to find some solutions and not be placed into that. I really don't like that. I don't like
the polarization of it.
The polarization doesn't get us anywhere. It just gets us more dysregulated, which is what the media wants, because you're going to get more followers and people are saying this negative or saying that negative. I mean, you need to create some energy and create some discussions, and I do that on X. I know I do, and I played up a little bit to create some discussions. We need to have some healthy discussions around it, but let's not be dualistic about it.
Yep.
You're very refreshing. Honestly, it's very refreshing to hear your take on this. I really feel that way. It's nice because you're right. There are so many people who polarize it and they're just fear mongering, and they do it. They monetize it. That's why. But yeah, this has been good. I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
We'll make it 3 times at some point before you join.
Hopefully we have a better front in front of what our nation's sitting in, and hopefully it's much more.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? We come back and everything Martin said came to fruition.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
We're one country. Good. We're not partisan. We're not tribalistic. We have interprovincial trade. We've got... Anyways, thank you, man. Words of wisdom.
Appreciate your
Follow. How can people connect with you and follow what you're doing? Let them know.
I write for the Post every Monday or Tuesday, so I go there. I'm also prolific on X or Twitter, whatever you want choose to call it. And those are the two main areas.
At Martin Pelletier. Is that
At M Pelletier CIO.
okay?
But I think that's it.
We'll throw it up on the screen.
Okay.
Done deal.
Show goes on.
Show goes on. See you guys later.